Life always presents challenges, but the important thing is not what we encounter, but how we face and overcome them. In this video, you will explore profound lessons that help solve 90% of life's problems, drawn from inspiring real-life stories. Watch until the end to find the key to changing your mindset and becoming the most potent version of yourself. Story 1. Honesty and fit. Dorian always brought laughter to the group of friends, always trying to fit in and please everyone. But behind that cheerful exterior, he hid a truth. He hated meaningless drinking sessions, hated the fake noise in gatherings that lacked genuine emotions. He couldn't speak up because he was afraid that if he ever refused, he would be pushed out, becoming a lonely outsider among people he thought were close. One day, the group discussed a prank. No, it was more of a bullying act. The victim, this time, was a shy, quiet boy who had just moved here. They planned to record the teasing, ridicule him, and post it online for fun. Laughter filled the air as they imagined the boy being confused, scared, and desperate. Dorian stayed silent. A feeling of unease rose within him. He knew this was wrong, but if he spoke out, would he become the boring one? Would they turn their backs on him? But this time, his fear no longer outweighed the voice inside him. Taking a deep breath, Dorian spoke. "I don't like this." The group fell silent for a moment, then burst into laughter. One person squinted at him. "What's wrong with you? Are you being a hypocrite?" Another patted Dorian mockingly. "We're just joking. Why be so serious?" His heart raced, and he felt defeated. He didn't expect his opposition to become a joke. But then, another voice spoke. "I don't like this either." Dorian turned around. It was Ryder, another friend in the group. Ryder looked at him with a determined gaze. He wasn't the only one who felt this was wrong. It's just that no one had dared to speak up before. But that small act of resistance didn't sway the others. The group waved it off, mocked them, and decided to continue their plan without them. And from that moment on, Dorian realized he had been excluded. The days that followed became suffocating. Harassing messages appeared on social media. Malicious rumors spread throughout the class. Scornful looks and whispers behind his back made every day at school feel like a mental battle for Dorian. He was completely isolated. Sometimes he wondered if he was wrong, if he should have stayed silent to maintain the relationships that once felt so close. One evening, sitting on the rooftop, staring at the starry sky, Dorian was filled with doubt. He had never felt so lonely. But just then, his phone buzzed. A new message appeared. It was from the shy boy. "Thank you for standing up for me. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." Dorian stared at the screen and slowly smiled. The coldness in his heart began to fade. He realized that sometimes standing up for what's right may cost him some people, but those who stay are the ones who truly matter. Dorian understood that standing up for what's right might cause him to lose some people, but those who remain are worth cherishing. It is better to be alone with a clear conscience than to fit in by losing oneself. Story 2. Independence and self-control. Rose once believed that Nova was everything. 3 years together, their love felt like a given. Nothing could change it. But then, without warning, Nova broke up with her one day. Just one short sentence shattered her world. In the days that followed, Rose drowned in sorrow. Everything reminded her of Nova, familiar songs, the old cafe, memories flooding back like a raging wave. She waited, hoping for a message from him, but all she received was silence. Every night she immersed herself in an endless loneliness. One day her mother quietly said, "Do you want to be the girl forever waiting for someone who won't return?" That sentence jolted Rose out of her cycle of sorrow. She looked at herself, tired, lost, having lost who she was. From that day, Rose decided to change. She began attending painting classes, letting each brushstroke help her release her emotions. She tried yoga, learning to listen to herself and relax her mind. She met with friends and opened her heart to new relationships. Gradually, the pain no longer confined her. Not stopping there, Rose realized she wanted to become a better version of herself. She signed up for a business management course, focusing on new knowledge. The evenings that were once filled with tears now became times of learning and growth. She attended seminars, worked on her communication skills, and gradually built her career and independent life. Then, one day, a familiar figure appeared while enjoying a peaceful moment in the park. Nova stood there, hesitant, his voice full of regret. He wanted to come back, wanted them to return to how they were. But Rose smiled softly. "Thank you for leaving. Because of that, I found myself," she said. She walked away, gentle yet determined. No regrets, no sorrow. For now, Rose understood that happiness doesn't lie in someone else's hands. It's something she creates herself. Lesson learned. Rose realized that happiness doesn't depend on anyone else but herself. A breakup isn't the end. It's an opportunity for her to find herself, grow, and become stronger. Story 3. Managing your emotions. Ruby sat across from her boss in the meeting. Her boss's eyes were cold, and his criticism was like a knife, making her face red with anger. Every word from her boss was like a punch to her self-esteem. Her hands clenched, shaking with uncontrollable rage. She wanted to fight back immediately and argue back to prove that she was not wrong. But a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. The last time she lost her temper and confronted her boss, the result was a salary cut. More than that, her image in the eyes of her colleagues was also seriously damaged. Emotions would only hurt her more. They could never help her protect herself. She took a deep breath, letting her anger subside. Her eyes stopped on the notes on the table. She nodded slightly, taking notes of her boss's words, even though each word was a direct insult. She said nothing, just listened silently, feeling as if time had stopped. Everything around her became blurry. It wasn't that she didn't have a reason to protest, but she knew that emotions couldn't solve anything. She understood the lesson from the previous times. When out of control, everything only made the situation worse. When the boss finished criticizing, Ruby regained her composure and raised her head, her eyes clear but determined. She opened her mouth, her voice calm and determined. "I understand what you mean, boss, and I will learn from my mistakes. However, I hope that I will also be listened to respectfully." Her words were like a bucket of cold water poured into the tense conference room atmosphere. There was a moment of silence. Everyone held their breath. No one dared to breathe loudly as if they were standing on a precarious cliff, just waiting to see what would happen next. Ruby clenched her hands under the table, feeling like a weight was pressing down on her. But she didn't let her emotions control her. On the outside, she maintained a calm appearance, like a hidden storm was gradually sweeping away the confusion in her heart. Her words were like a gentle declaration of war, not angry, but powerful. All eyes in the room turned to her, and everyone was surprised. No one expected that Ruby, who was always quiet and rarely spoke, could react so decisively. Then, the space seemed to bloom with a ray of light, and a colleague suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence. "I agree with Ruby. We should treat each other with respect." That sentence was like a gentle push that woke everyone up. After a moment of silence, the boss realized that he had gone too far. He nodded, loosening the stern look on his face, and his voice also softened, no longer criticizing but only giving advice. The meeting ended in a quiet but no longer tense atmosphere. Ruby packed her things, preparing to leave, when a colleague leaned close to her ear, whispering, "You are courageous." The unexpected compliment made her smile suddenly. That was when she realized that true strength does not lie in immediate resistance, but in self-control, patience, and the ability to maintain composure in the most challenging situations. She understood that sometimes silence and calmness are the most potent answers. Ruby realized that strength does not lie in immediate resistance, but in controlling emotions and maintaining a firm stance. Calmness and self-respect are the wisest ways to deal with pressure and criticism. Story 4. Having the right mindset. James scrolled through social media, and the news feed before him was filled with glamorous images. Friends buying houses, others getting promoted, some enjoying a trip to a distant country. The bright smiles and the dazzling moments made James feel left out. He looked at himself. An ordinary job, a life that was nothing special. A sense of boredom rose within him, and he blamed himself. 4 years ago, he was a poor student with nothing. Now he had a stable job, could support himself, and even help his family. Wasn't that progress? Yet the feeling of inadequacy still clung to him like a ghost he couldn't shake off. One day, James decided to try something new. Meeting and talking to people he admired on social media. He wanted to see what lay behind those perfect photos. And then, the truth surprised him. When speaking in person, the friend who had proudly shared about buying a house sighed, his eyes tired. "I had to take on massive debt. The pressure is so much that I can't sleep some nights. But online, who cares about that?" Another person, who had boasted of a high-paying job, admitted, "I'm exhausted from constant overtime. I have money but no time to live." James realized that what he saw was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the glamorous facade were pressures and anxieties that were never shared. From that day, he no longer placed himself in an invisible race with others. He began to focus on himself, setting smaller goals, learning a new skill, taking better care of his health, and finding joy in simple things. A year later, an opportunity for a promotion came his way, not because he was chasing after anyone, but because he had steadily followed his path. He smiled in the mirror and said, "I don't need to race against anyone. I need to be better than I was yesterday." Just like James, John was a guy who always put others first. He would help friends, listen to them vent, and even sacrifice his interests to please others. But in return, what he got was only disdain. Friends came to him when they needed something, but when he needed a shoulder to lean on, they were either too busy or ignored him. At first, John didn't realize it. He thought that if he treated everyone well, they would appreciate him. But gradually, the harsh truth revealed itself. The breaking point came when he helped Mark, a valued friend, study for a whole month. But on his birthday, John didn't even receive a single message from Mark. When he asked, Mark smiled dismissively. "Oh, I forgot." But it's no big deal. That comment felt like a knife to his heart. For the first time, John asked himself, "Am I putting the wrong people on a pedestal? Am I giving too much without getting anything in return?" One day, John bumped into David, an old friend. They talked, and David said, "John, do you realize? You're kind, but no one appreciates it because you don't appreciate yourself." That was a wake-up call. John began to change. He no longer tried to please everyone. He started investing time in himself and relationships with people who truly valued him. And then, something miraculous happened. When John learned to value himself, those around him started to look at him differently. One day, Mark came to John for help with studying again. But he smiled this time. "Sorry, I have something else to do." Mark was stunned. For the first time, he realized that John was no longer the one always there to help without question. Lesson learned. The lesson is clear. If you don't value yourself, others won't value you either. Don't put anyone on a pedestal who doesn't deserve it. Invest in those who genuinely appreciate you. Never sacrifice your growth for someone else. Story 5. Living with Purpose. Under the dim streetlights, Leroy wandered among the bustling crowd, feeling emptier than ever. He had tried everything: a stable job, new hobbies, distant trips in search of answers, but everything only gave him a fleeting sense of fulfillment, then vanished like dust in the wind. Each day passed, and he kept asking himself, "What am I here for?" One afternoon, as the sun set behind the high buildings, Leroy came across an older man selling lottery tickets on the sidewalk. His face was lined with deep wrinkles from the passage of time, but his smile was bright, as though he had never known sadness. Curiously, Leroy sat down next to him, hesitating for a moment before asking, "Old man, you must sell tickets daily in this hot weather. Don't you ever get tired?" The older man looked at him, his gaze kind and deep, as though he had weathered countless storms in life. He smiled gently and replied, "Tired? Yes, I am. But being tired doesn't mean I can't be happy. You know, the purpose of life isn't something you go out and find. It's not waiting for you somewhere to be discovered. You have to create it yourself. If you keep waiting, you might never find it. But you'll understand if you start now with small, meaningful things." Leroy went silent. All this time, he had thought the purpose of life was something distant, something grand that needed to be found, while it was probably right here in the simplest of things. He had let time pass, waiting for a moment of enlightenment, forgetting that his actions were what truly gave life meaning. From that day forward, Leroy no longer dwelled in meaningless questions. He began to act. These are not grand things, but small acts. Helping someone, trying something new, and living each moment fully. He slowly realized that the meaning of life isn't in the destination, but in the journey itself. So, don't wait to find the meaning of life. Create it yourself every day in the simplest of things. Story 6. Accepting change. Emma used to be a person who loved stability. She believed that as long as she had a safe job, a living wage, and a quiet life, she would always be protected from the uncertainties of life. Every day passed the same: going to the office in the morning, returning to her small apartment in the evening, meeting a few friends on the weekend, repeating like a familiar cycle. She didn't need more than that. But then one day, everything collapsed. The company she worked for suddenly went bankrupt. There was no warning, no time to prepare. That morning, she was still a hard-working employee with long-term plans, but she was left with only a dismissal letter by the afternoon. Fear surrounded her. Worries about money and the future squeezed her heart. She had done everything right and followed all the rules to have a stable life, but she still couldn't avoid the incident. The feeling of helplessness made her want to escape reality. In the days that followed, Emma was lost in confusion and despair. She blamed her fate and herself for not looking for another opportunity sooner, and the world for being so cruel. But then, amid those uncertain days, she suddenly remembered a saying of her father: "Life is always changing, and that is a good thing. Every challenge is an opportunity for you to become stronger." That saying used to be just a passing piece of advice, but now it echoed in her head, stronger than ever. Emma began to think, if everything had changed, why didn't she try to change with it? If this door had closed, who knows, another door would open. And as she asked herself, she suddenly remembered the passion she had buried long ago: baking. She used to love kneading dough, baking, and experimenting with new flavors. But she never thought it could become a career. Previously, she chose the safer path, but now, when she had nothing to lose, why not try? Starting over from scratch was not easy. The first days were full of difficulties. Failing with a batch of burnt cakes, struggling to find customers, and struggling with the bit of money left in the account. Sometimes she wanted to give up, but everything gradually changed. She gradually learned from her mistakes, improved the recipe, and found a way to approach customers. The first cakes were sold, and gradually, she had loyal customers. A year later, Emma opened her small bakery. She was no longer an office worker afraid of change. She was a boss, in charge of her work, in charge of her life. One late afternoon, standing in the bakery, looking at the trays of cakes just out of the oven, smelling the sweet aroma in the warm space, she suddenly smiled. If she hadn't lost her job that day, she might still be stuck in her old job, living a safe but monotonous life. She realized that change was not as scary as she thought. Sometimes, seemingly tragic events are the door that leads us to a better path. The lesson is, don't be afraid of change. Sometimes, things that seem like losses are opportunities to become better versions of ourselves. Dare to accept challenges because there are always great opportunities in difficult times. Lesson learned. Don't fear change. Sometimes, what seems like a loss is an opportunity to become a better version of yourself. Be brave enough to embrace challenges because hidden within difficulties are excellent opportunities. Story 7. Action and responsibility. Nathan was always afraid. Since he was young, he had carried the fear of failure. He wanted to start a business but was scared of losing everything. He dreamed of a better job, but fearing rejection kept him from trying. Whenever he faced an important decision, he would tell himself, "I'll do it, but not now." Nathan's life passed this way. Each day was the same, and each dream grew further away. Until one day, in the small room filled with the smell of old wood, his grandfather, an ex-soldier who had endured countless brutal battles, spoke in a deep voice. "Are you afraid of failure? Let me tell you something. There was no time to be afraid when I went to the battlefield. You either move forward or you get left behind. Fear doesn't kill you, but hesitation does. If you let fear control you, you'll be stuck here forever." Those words were like a fire burning through the ice inside Nathan. It wasn't just a battlefield story. It was the truth about life. For the first time, he saw that his fear was no longer an invisible enemy, but something he could face and overcome. Nathan decided to act. He didn't wait for the perfect moment, didn't look for absolute certainty. He started with a small investment, met customers independently, and accepted the risks that might come. The first failures were inevitable. His business plans had setbacks, clients rejected him, and he struggled with challenges he had never encountered. But instead of stepping back, he learned how to rise, correct his mistakes, and continue. As days passed, the fear remained, but it no longer held him back. A year later, when he looked back, Nathan realized the most important lesson. If he had waited for the perfect moment, he might still be standing on the sidelines, letting life pass him by because of hesitation. Lesson learned. You can't change the past, but can decide the present and future. Fear is not an obstacle. It's just a challenge for you to overcome. Don't let it control you. Take control of it and move forward. Final lesson from all 7 stories. When you listen to these life lessons, remember that each challenge, each turning point, and each decision is an opportunity for you to reinvent yourself and become a better version of yourself. Loss or difficulty is not the end, but the stepping stone to help you rise, mature, and grow stronger. Don't fear change. Don't let fear or life's pressures control you. Remember, when you dare to stand up for what's right and know how to value yourself, you will attract the people who truly deserve your time and the best opportunities. Please don't wait to find the meaning of life. Create it yourself each day, starting from the most minor actions. Doing so will change your life and make you a more excellent, confident, and resilient version of yourself.